With me now, forensic criminologist, police expert, and author of The Truth Behind the Black Lives Matter Movement and the War on Police, Dr. Ron Martinelli. Dr. Ron, thanks for being here.
No problem. Good to see you again.
All right, Dr. Ron, we've seen this video. A lot of people have seen this video. This actually happened. This shooting happened several years ago. The trial didn't happen until this video came to light just last year. The narrative that's coming from the left, though, is about what happened after the actual shooting. What happened after the actual shooting? In the video, it appears that the police officer, Jason Stockley, goes to the back seat of the car, the suspect's car, and fiddles in some way with the gun. That left the left to create the narrative that the officer had planted the gun in that car, that the suspect did not have a gun at all, that it was an unjustified shooting. After watching these videos, what do you make of all this?
Well, actually, this is what I do for a living, officer-involved shooting. And I've looked at this case. I've looked at the judge's ruling, Judge Timothy Wilson, an excellent jurist who gave it a very good forensic analysis, looked at the evidence, and looked at the standards of proof. And I think that the problem that the public continues to have is that they have some sort of TV CSI idea of what forensic investigations and officer-involved shootings are all about. There is no doubt in my mind, having looked at this thing, and I think the judge found that there was a lot of doubt in this case with regards to the justification of the shooting. The judge felt that the shooting was justified. The judge believed that the prosecutor did not meet their burden of proof. And what Officer Stockley did is he actually did something that was against policy. He took a urban rifle that was a personal rifle and put it in the back seat of the patrol car. The fact that there's no DNA on that weapon other than Stockley's doesn't really necessarily mean very much, because we know that he touched the gun, he pulled it out of the car, he opened up the cylinder, he removed bullets from the gun. He shouldn't have done any of that, and that's why his DNA was on the gun. You don't necessarily find DNA and fingerprints from suspects on guns all of the time. So this, again, is a very emotional, non-forensic response from uninformed people that want to make a big deal about this and protest.
Right, and that's the interesting part to me. No one, I guess, is defending the fact that what Officer Stockley did in a certain respect was not the correct procedure here. But the trial is not whether he is a bad police officer. The trial is whether he intentionally murdered Anthony Lamar Smith. And I read the entire court ruling as well, and I don't think that the burden of proof, as you said, was met here, because Officer Stockley also testified that he saw the suspect in the car with the firearm, and that when he approached the car after they ultimately crashed it, when he approached the car, he told the suspect to stop moving around. He told the suspect to show him his hands and not reach for anything, and the suspect didn't comply with that. How is the officer supposed to know whether he was a threat to his life, whether he was reaching for a gun or not?
Right. And Liz, again, people, all they have to do is look at the video in its totality. Before, we had the suspect with a lethal weapon, which was a vehicle, who actually hit one of the officers as he was, trying to escape. He backed into a patrol car and he tried to hit one of the officers when he escaped. These officers only have a millisecond to make a life and death decision. And what's important that nobody talks about, these protesters, is don't forget that the United States Department of Justice had an opportunity to review this case. And they did it under two Democratic administrations with two Democratic attorney generals, Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch. And DOJ found that there was insufficient evidence to show that there was a murder. And don't forget that the first prosecutor that took a look at this case did not file on the officer because he did not think that the state could meet its burden of proof. It was only the second prosecutor that picked up the baton and tried to run with it, where we got a prosecution. This was absolutely a political prosecution and not a forensic investigation.
Right. Well, that's what you said before, that it was an emotional reaction. And I think that's kind of proved because multiple experts in this field passed on prosecuting this. The Department of Justice passed on it. It was only when this video came to light, and it wasn't additional evidence. The video just makes it more emotional because it's difficult to watch something like that. No one wants to see it. It's a tragedy, whether or not it's justified. The suspect was fleeing the police officers. This so easily could be avoided if people just comply with what the police ask them to do. There's no reason to run away from a police officer at 90 miles miles an hour and to expect that to have a good outcome. One more thing, Dr. Ron, though, from a forensics place, this is an argument that's being made, or I guess that's being neglected by the left, and that's the fact that one of the gunshot wounds in Mr. Smith was in his left flank. That's an odd place for a gunshot wound to be if he was shot through the window of a car, which he was. Does that give any rise to the argument that he was, in fact, leaning towards the right to reach for a gun, and that's the only way that the bullet would have had access to that area of his body?
Oh, that's great. And that's a very good question. And the biomechanics seem to be very consistent with that. So when we have an investigation, forensically, what we try to do is reconcile or see whether it reconciles an officer or a witness statement in consideration or in comparison to the forensic evidence. And in this particular case, it sure looked like the biomechanics supported what the officer had to say in this case.
Right. There's no proof that the officer didn't feel a reasonable threat to his life. There's no proof that the suspect wasn't reaching for something. And if he was reaching for something, it's the instinct of the officer, how they're trained to assume that they're reaching for a lethal weapon. Dr. Ron, I appreciate, as always, you breaking down these cases. They're not easy. They certainly cause a lot of angst and a lot of problems. And I wish people would look at the facts like you do instead of just letting their emotion guide them. Thanks for being here.